With that, I recognize Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman and colleagues, this has always been a fight to find common ground, and it will be a challenge now, but that has always been the history of the Finance Committee. Now, it may be something of a journalistic first, colleagues, but I would like to enter into the record 3 Wall Street Journal opinion articles on the trade issue. One is entitled, "The Dumbest Trade War in History." A second is called, "Pray for Surrender in Trump's Dumb Trade War." And the third article is entitled, "Trump Blinks on North American Tariffs." Now, America has had its first taste of Trump's rancid trade policy this week. Here, colleagues, are the receipts that demonstrate how much damage these flawed trade policies that we have seen thus far are doing. They're hurting regular people. We saw the effects on Wall Street. I could go on. One of the central problems, and I find it sad to say this, is that Donald Trump has repeatedly lied to the American people about who's going to pay these tariffs. For a full year, you heard again and again and again, it was going to be these foreigners. The foreigners were going to pick up the bill. And that's just wrong. And that's just terrible economics. And that's not right to say that to working people and small businesses and others, because they're the ones who pick up the bills. Now, who could have seen these developments? I thought it was coming because Donald Trump governs by whim, and in trade, that hurts American families. His tariff bluff created huge uncertainty that is costing American businesses and putting the global economy on what I would describe as a month-to-month lease. And frankly, my top priority today is to figure out who in hell in the Trump administration is going to be in charge of trade, what they plan to do, and how this sort of bedlam is going to get straightened out and we get some help for American families. This weekend featured a bunch of fake promises, starting with the Trump threats to slap huge blanket tariffs on products from Canada, Mexico, and China. Then Donald Trump backed down after Canada and Mexico repackaged some stale border security promises into a new box. Foreign leaders around the world were laughing at us, colleagues, and the president really got rolled. So this brings us to the business before the committee today, considering the nomination of Jamison Greer to serve as U.S. Trade Representative. He and I met first when he worked with Bob Lighthizer. He served as an attorney at several notable firms and was Bob Lighthizer's chief of staff. I appreciated the meeting that we had a couple of days ago, and particularly your straightforward commitment to tell me what's going on with trade before I read it online or in some other publication. And I asked for that, and I appreciate getting it, because every one of my colleagues will be asking me that. And I venture that Senator Crapo may get the same kind of question. The committee can't function if it's kept in the dark like it was over the past week. So I expect that you'll pick up the phone and call us when trade is on the agenda in this administration. And when you speak to me, you will be speaking to my colleagues on this side of the dais. In our conversation, I was trying to figure out the trade chaos that occurred over the past weekend. Now, I thought it was actually about trade. My constituents in Oregon thought it was about trade. They call up, Ron, 1 out of 3 jobs in Oregon depends on trade. What's going on this weekend? But you told me that the tariff threats were not actually about trade at all, but it was rather an issue of border security. So I'm interested in exploring which is which, and I didn't leave that conversation we had very confident that you would expect to be in the room when these kinds of trade decisions are being made. And this is something that ought to concern every member of this committee on both sides of the aisle. The American people need to know who's making the trade case for them. What we say in Oregon, this is all about value-added jobs. You grow stuff in Oregon, you make stuff in Oregon, you add value to it, and you ship it around the world because Oregon products are very appealing around the world. But you've got to know who's making the case. Now, the law says USTR is in charge of international trade. In this administration so far, it's not at all clear that's the case. Is it Mr. Lutnick at the Commerce Department, Treasury Secretary Bessent, Homeland Security? Who is it? The Finance Committee needs a USTR who doesn't pass the buck, who speaks with the authority on the administration's trade policy. And I'll close with this. I want to make sure that we get the nominees' views when it comes to using tariffs to settle scores that don't have anything to do with trade. For example, no administration has used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs before Donald Trump. It's my view that's an abuse of the law, and a number of us have already introduced legislation to rein it in. If the USTR has no role in decisions like that, I'm not even sure what their job is. International trade policy is just too important to American families, workers, small businesses, manufacturers, and farmers to be sacrificed to make headlines on unrelated issues. We will not have a full-scale Crapo-Wyden scrum with respect to potatoes in Oregon and Idaho because we love them both and we know Oregon's are superior. And we need to sell these products in foreign markets. And that's not about going back and forth over whose products are better. It's my hope the committee will be spending more time on making it easier to sell made in the USA products and less time figuring out why this administration is putting, as we saw last weekend, Americans' livelihoods at risk. Mr. Greer, I don't envy your position. My friend, Senator Hagerty, he and I have talked about trade. I don't envy your challenge because based on last week, it is unclear how these decisions are going to be made, what the influence is going to be of Mr. Greer, and what Senator Hagerty, who has longtime interest in this, is going to be doing as well. So this is an opportunity for you all to make a case for how you're going to pass trade measures that are really going to make sense for the American people at a crucial time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.